Referencing, I guess as a landlord, you'd be doing your own referencing. We use Tenancy 360 as a software. There's loads of them out there. They're all quite cheap, all do very similar stuff. It'll pretty much ask 3 questions. Can you afford to live there? Do you have a bad credit, yes or no? And it might talk to your previous landlord for references. So typically, affordability criteria in the industry is 30 times monthly rent. So if your rent's £1,000, these people, no, it's not the law, it's just their guidance that says these people would suggest that you need to be earning £30,000 a year. If they don't, you can go for a guarantor. The guarantor bar is a little bit higher, and the industry says that your guarantor should be earning 36 times, because I guess they've got their commitments already and they need to be able to afford the commitment of the guarantee as well. So you'll be doing that yourself. And have you done a good enough job of referencing, I guess is my kind of question. Do you know enough? Have you asked the right questions? Bit more on referencing. If you're not a British citizen or Irish citizen, you need to prove your right to rent in the UK. It's quite complicated. It was more complicated than it is now. The share code system is excellent. You send a link to your tenant, or your applicant rather. They fill it in and give you a share code. You download that, and your requirement is to prove it's them. Their share code document has got their status on it. It's got a date on it and their picture on it, and you've got to do 2 things. You've got to file it and prove it's them. So the only way to do that, you can do it on video, but because people collect keys from the office, we do it face to face. So one of the processes we have is that we ask a check-in process: have they got a right to rent document? And if so, we've got a ticket, make sure it's them, and then file it. You've got to keep that evidence in place. If you get that wrong, £3,000 fine. Again, I'm not aware of anyone that's been fined. I am aware of one tenant who gave us a false passport and was taken back. But we had done the right to rent check on him, and what we did was reasonable because we're not fraud detection experts. But not doing it at all probably wouldn't have cut past muster. Yeah, so moving checklist is how we do that. So have you got a moving checklist? Signing tenancy agreements, it's a really important part of the process, really. So have you got a written one? Is it from a reputable place? So we use ours from the NRLA, National Residential Landlord Association. You can put a lot of special conditions in there about how you want things done in your property, but you can't conflict with legislation. So if it conflicts with legislation, that is overruling your special conditions. Ask them to read your tenancy agreement, and you can do 3, 6 months, 12 months, or any period really. But if it gets to 3 years or 7 years, slightly different process. We don't recommend signing 3 or 7 year agreements, or at least refer it to a solicitor if you want to. It will explain who's responsible for the bills, and don't charge tenant fees. In 2019, that became the law that you can't charge tenants, I think, prohibited fees, that you can charge them for basically a lost key and maybe replacing themselves and re-signing a tenancy agreement, but that is it. And if you do charge fees by mistake or unwittingly, there's a £5,000 fine and up to £30,000 fine if you do it repeatedly. But by that point, you probably know you're doing it and doing it on purpose. So don't charge tenant fees. Deposits, this is a bit of legislation for a long time. There are 3 government schemes: TDS, DPS, and My Deposits. You can have a custodial arrangement where you physically pay the money to one of these schemes, or an insured, where you keep the money in your bank, but you pay for the privilege of having it in your bank. I was never comfortable with insured, so I just get it out of our bank as soon as possible and into one of these schemes. You can't charge more than 5 weeks' rent, and the calculation must look like that. Monthly rent times 12 divided by 52, and then round down. So even if it's like 1 pence over, that's not right. So you kind of got to round down. So that's important there. And within 30 days, you've got to do 2 things. Protect a deposit, so pay it over, and give your applicant the prescribed information. So how do you know you've done those things in 30 days? So how do we know that we've done those things? Our client account is reconciled every day. So money comes in and it kind of goes out the same or next day. If you don't register the deposit, this is one of the things that you can't fix retrospectively. You might be liable to pay between 1 and 3 times the amount of the deposit back to the tenant as well as a deposit. So getting that right is really important. That's quite costly. If you 31 days, you can ever go back and fix that. Signing tenancy agreements. These 3 documents you need to give to the tenant before you can serve a Section 21. So do it at the start of the tenancy agreement. It's not, you can still serve a Section 21 if you don't do an EICR, if you don't give that to them, but you need to give it to them eventually. So do that on signing the contract as well. And an emergency telephone number. So we make sure that we do all those things. We've got a checklist, as you might expect, and we sign all of our documents online. So we can give them the contract, attach about 6 to 10 documents, depending on the type of property, and they sign to say they've seen it, which is great, because then you've got the evidence that it's been on there.